So today, in honor of Shavuot coming up next week, as many of you may know, Shavuot is coming up next week, Thursday night, and then Friday and Saturday. It's a 2-day holiday year anywhere outside of Israel. And it's really the holiday that we've been looking forward to for the past many weeks and days, ever since Passover. In fact, we have instituted the counting of the Omer, which really is a type of countdown. There's no word for countdown in Hebrew. I'd rather use the word count up, because we're looking forward to ascending to the mountain of Sinai and to receiving the Torah this year. So we've instituted this count each and every day in anticipation of this festival of Shavuot, again, that's coming up next week on Thursday night, Friday, and Saturday. Shavuot really is a love story. If there is a theme to this holiday, that's the theme. Love story between God and the Jewish people. It's a love that is so strong and so promising that it's a love that translates into marriage between the Jewish people and God and the Jewish people. In fact, the Midrash speaks so beautifully about some of the verses that we will recite together on Shavuot. We usually read from the Torah on Shavuot. That speaks about, these verses speak about the steps of towards this marriage, of the proposal, of the marriage contract, of the going to the mikvah before actually getting married, as any bride and groom would do today. So let's read the first reference here, and then again I want to make sure to make this point once again. I encourage anyone to ask questions. It should be much more of a dialogue and a discussion than anything else. That's the purpose of learning. And learning, in true learning, true learning is a two-way street. So I want to hear your questions as we go along. You can chat them or you can unmute yourself and ask them. But let's go directly to this beautiful love story between the Jewish people and God that we will celebrate next week on this holiday of Shavuot. The love story is focused on the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, which is the day of the wedding, the moment of marriage, in which we sealed our commitment to one another and we became married, us and God. How did this happen? So according to the Midrash, the 7 weeks after the exodus from Egypt, I'm reading it from the reference, the children of Israel stood at the foot of Mount Sinai and prepared to encounter God, prepared to encounter their groom, so to speak. That day, which came to be known as Shavuot, has been understood in Midrash, in Midrash Rabbah, as the day of the marriage between God and the Jewish people. So here are the verses that speak of steps towards this ultimate marriage. Step number 1, God proposes. How so? God says in the Torah, you can look it up in Exodus 19. Now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples. So God says, look, I'm setting conditions. If you accept them, we can proceed to the next step and eventually get married. What are the conditions? You have to obey me and keep my covenant. And then, Vayitev li am segula, my treasured possession. Sometimes segula is lost in translation. That word that is translated here as treasured. Others have referred to segula not just as treasured, but as chosen. That's where maybe the title of chosen nation comes from. One thing for sure is that segula points to this utter commitment, this ability to be completely faithful and dedicated to our relationship with God in a way that we think of God all day long. When we wake up in the morning, we ask, what does God want from me now? When we go to work, what does God want from me now? When we get dressed, what does God want from me now? And therefore, you'll also find so many different Jewish laws that pertain really to every step of the way. You can't eat in Judaism, right? Without asking, what does God want from me now? To say a blessing, to elevate this food. You can't go to sleep before saying the Shema, because again, you ask yourself, what does God want from me now? This question of what does God want from me now was the condition that God gave the Jewish people for our marriage with him. Once we said, you know what? Yes, we'll ask that question at all times. What does God want from me now? Then God proceeded to the next step. That's when we accepted. We said the people accept. All the people answered as one, saying, all that the Eternal has spoken, we will do. Now, then we're ready now for the stage has been set. We're ready for the actual marriage. People themselves, as at a mikvah, spiritual bath, as many of you know, traditionally used by a bride before the wedding. Moses came down from the mountain to the people and warned the people to stay pure, and they washed their clothes. Again, an action of cleanliness, and an action that is very similar to what the mikveh does to a bride before she marries today. Then, next step, then God and the people joined under the chuppah. How so? How do we know there was a chuppah there on Mount Sinai? Because it says as follows: Moses led the people out of the camp towards God, and they took their places where? Beneath the mountain, at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke, for the eternal had come down upon it in fire, which is again resembling this image of a chuppah. That we were under a mountain. That, by the way, the Talmud takes this verse to be completely literal, that God uprooted the mountain and placed it above our heads, again, forming this image of a chuppah. And then you have the cloud, which is like the drape on the chuppah itself, or the talit maybe, that comes to embrace the bride and the groom. So again, we have this chuppah image. And then what else is needed for kosher marriage? A ketubah, a marriage contract. What was the ketubah during this marriage between God and the Jewish people? It was the 10 commandments, or the Torah itself. There is a ketubah. The Eternal said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teachings and commandments which I've inscribed to instruct them. That, according to the Midrash, was the ketubah. Again, as we do today. The groom gives the bride a ketubah, makes promises to the bride, which is what God did during the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, giving us that Torah, or those tablets, which were the ketubah during this marriage. Now, every year on Shavuot, we re-celebrate this marriage, and in a way we renew our vows, and we commit ourselves once again to God, to his commandments, and to that ultimate promise, like we said before, of asking ourselves at every step of the day, what does God want from me now? But to go a little bit deeper into this, and maybe to prepare ourselves, not just historically, but also emotionally and psychologically for Shavuot, I want to go to the root of love, to the root of marriage, and dare I say, to the root of every successful relationship. Because if Shavuot is coming to teach us one thing, it is coming to teach us how to maintain, develop, and succeed in every relationship that we have, particularly in our marital relationships, because again, this is what Shavuot is about, a marriage between us and God, but also in every other relationship, whether it's friendly relationships with our friends, with our children, or even with acquaintances. Now, many of you may know, but are familiar with this book, but in 1995, one of the great books about love, about relationships came out. I mean, you know, I'm subjective here. I think it's one of the great books, and you may disagree, but it is the book called 5 Languages of Love by Gary Chapman. Gary Chapman is an American author. He's, by the way, a chaplain too, a pastor. And he, after 12 years of counseling couples, he decided to write a book because he understood that the root of every problem that he's ever faced in counseling can be translated into 5 different categories, which he called 5 languages of love. Let's just read what it says. Yes, after 12 years of notes that he had made when counseling couples, and asked the questions of when someone said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me. What did they want? What were they complaining about? And he realized that all of these answers, after 12 years, these are thousands upon thousands of answers, fell into 5 different categories. He called them 5 languages of life. Love, 5 ways that people speak and understand emotional love. Now, what are those 5 languages? Number 1, words of affirmation. Number 2, spending quality time. Number 3, giving gifts. Number 4, acts of service. And number 5, physical touch. He realized that when people were complaining, usually sometimes it was because they weren't giving compliments to one another. Sometimes it was because they weren't spending quality time. Sometimes because people complain, oh, he or she never buys me gifts. Sometimes it was because of acts of service. You don't really take out the garbage. You don't help cleaning the dishes at home. or whatever it may be that you've defined as an act of service. And number 5, physical touch. I have no intimacy with my partner. There's no physical touch, maybe even just a caress, maybe just a hug or a kiss. He's cold, she's dry, whatever it may be. Those were the complaints that he met after 12 years of counseling. Now, I do believe that Judaism made up these 5 love languages, these 5 languages of love, way before Gary Chapman in 1995. Where so? You'll be stunned to know. But in the Talmud, we speak of 5 voices of love. How so? It's a beautiful passage from the Talmud here by Rabbi Chelbo. In the very first tractate of the Talmud, in the tractate of Brachot, Rabbi Chelbo said in the name of Rabbi Huna, another rabbi of his times, whoever partakes of the wedding meal of the bridegroom and does not bring him joy, forfeits the 5 voices, again, 5 voices mentioned in the verse, the voice of joy and the voice of gladness, 2, the voice of the bridegroom, 3, the voice of the bride, 4, and the voice of them, 5, that says, give thanks to the Lord of hosts. And if he does rejoice him with those 5 voices, what is his reward? Rabbi Joshua, the son of Levi, said he is privileged to acquire the Torah, which was also given with 5 voices. For it is said, and it came to pass on the 3rd day when it was morning, that there were sounds and lightnings and the thick cloud upon the mount. Again, number 3, 4, and the voice of a horn, and 5, the voice of the horn waxed even louder. And then Moses spoke, and God answered him by a voice. So you see 5 voices when the Torah was given, almost as if God was using those 5 languages of love to teach us how to maintain this marriage between him and us on this holy day of Shavuot, the day of our marriage with God. Now, what are they relating to? What are those 5 voices about? What are those 5 voices that God communicated to the people, as Rabbi Chelbo here teaches, as Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi teaches in the Talmud, in this Talmudic passage? I think they relate to the same 5 languages of love, the same 5 voices of love. And indeed, I want you, as we explore them, and as we delve into them, as we dig into them, I really want you to ask yourself, are your relationships filled with those 5 voices? Or are you lacking some of them? Whether, again, it's your marital relationships or relationships with friends, with your children, with anyone else that you may know. Do they lack any of these voices? Do you have all of them? And if you have all of them, do you have all of them fully, wholesomely? Or even if you have all of them, maybe one of them is lacking a little bit, is missing. Think about this as we go through these 5 voices or these 5 languages, because I do believe that it's key, not just to preparing ourselves for Shavuot, for that recommitment to God, and as we receive the Torah anew on Shavuot. By the way, that's why we read the 10 Commandments on Shavuot. So it's not just in preparation for our recommitment to God and our relationship with the one above, but I think it's also a time to really recommit ourselves to any type of relationship. And therefore, there should be a preparation or maybe a type of reconnection to the relationships that we do have in life with our friends, with our loved ones, with our children, and so forth. So number 1, words of action. Let's explore the meaning of that. The first love language is word of affection. Now, it doesn't just mean compliments. It doesn't just mean, hey, I like the word, I like your dress today. Or your cooking, wow, came out delicious. And you know what? You were so kind to that person, I noticed. And wow, you're so good with children. Not just that, not just compliments like that, but I think it relates to our ability to use words in the most effective way, in the way that words are meant to be used. Because according to the book of Proverbs, according to Judaism and so many other places, the most powerful part of our body is this right here, our mouths, our tongue, our words. Words can create life. In the words of the book of Proverbs, King Solomon, life and death are in the hands of the tongue, which means words can create life. Words can create, God forbid, death. To the point that the Talmud says that a negative word, and I'm reading here from this reference, can be even more dangerous than the sword. Why? Because the sword, after all, can only hurt a person at a close range, while a few disparaging remarks can destroy a person or an entire group of people at a very far range. After all, God brought the entire cosmos into being. How? With just a few utterances. God created the world with words. So we too, why did God choose to do that? God could have created the world with a magic show, with a magic stick, I don't know, in other ways. Why with words? To teach us that we too can build people with words, and God forbid, we can also destroy them with words. Words are even more dangerous than the sword. Words are creators of destruction, or creators of construction. That is therefore the reason why this is really the most powerful part of our body. So what does this refer to? It refers to that the first condition in every relationship is the condition of knowing how to use our mouths, our tongues. I can tell you, and I've said this before, but I can tell you that as many of you, I'm sure, very often we enter a room, we enter a home that we've never been to before. We enter even just a social place, a hall, a wedding hall, or whatever it may be. And we can feel the energy in the room. And very often we feel a tense energy. And I have no doubt in my mind that when we do feel that tense energy in rooms that we've never entered before, or that we have entered before and we still feel the tense energy, it's simply because the words that are pronounced in that room are words of anger, of frustration, of hatred, of tension, of negativity in general. And that's because we really believe again that words create energy. Conversely, when we enter into a room where the energy is positive, that's because the words that are mentioned in that room are as positive as can be, are words of love, of action, of compliments, and so on. So what God is telling us by using those five voices is that on Shavuot, is that the first condition that I am giving you before I marry you is that you know how to use this weapon right here. If you don't know how to use it, I don't want to marry you. Your relationship, our relationship will fail. And therefore, it doesn't just go to our ability to use compliments. It goes to our ability to use at all this weapon, not just towards compliments, but towards blocking it from saying any negativity, channeling it towards speaking words of love and of affection and of giving and of kindness. That's what this is referring to. I was reminded of the story by Benjamin Zander that I took here from a TED talk that he gave. Benjamin Zander is a composer who was speaking about the power, or his TED talk is called The Transformative Power of Classical Music. But he ended his talk with one of the most riveting stories I've ever heard that shares exactly this message. It's a story, I can read it here. So this is in his words. So now I have one last thought. He tells the attendants, which is that it really makes a difference what we say, the words that come out of our mouth. And he shared this story. I learned this from a woman who survived Auschwitz, one of the rare survivors. She went to Auschwitz when she was just 15 years old. And her brother was 8. The parents were lost. And she told me this. She said, we were in the train, in that cattle car, right? Going to Auschwitz. And I looked down and I saw my brother's shoes were missing. So I said to him, this is this woman speaking. I said to him, why are you so stupid? Can't you keep your things together, for goodness sake? The way an elder sister might speak to a younger brother. Unfortunately, it was the last thing she ever said to him, because she never saw him again. Suppose the Nazis immediately came and tore her from her brother, and she never saw him again. He did not survive. And so when she came out of Auschwitz, she made a vow. She told me this. She said, I walked out of Auschwitz into life, and I made a vow. And the vow was, I will never say anything that couldn't stand as the last thing I ever say. I'll never say, I'm going to repeat this, never say anything that couldn't stand as the last thing I ever say. Now, can we do that? No. And we'll make ourselves wrong and others wrong. But it is a possibility to live into. I think that as we celebrate Shavuot and recommit ourselves to any relationship that we may have, I think that's the number one thing we have to think about. Can we really commit to saying things that will stand the test of time and space? Because if not, maybe it's better we don't say them altogether. We spoke about controlling our anger last time. Maybe one of the ways to do so is simply to pause before we're about to say something negative. Pause. You can try and trick your mind, because our mind plays games with us, into saying to your mind, you know what, yes, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, but I'll say it tomorrow. And by the time tomorrow comes, you won't want to say it, because you'll realize that these words that you were about to say don't stand the test of time. They cannot stand as the last thing you will ever say. So maybe that's a tool to use. But one thing for sure we know is that in relationships, speech is probably one of the most important, if not the most important thing. If we can use this weapon to say positive things, maybe we should remain silent. You know, they say in the book of Proverbs that the wise are recognized not by their words, they are recognized by their silence. The music, speaking of Benjamin Zander and classical music, you have the same thing. Benjamin Zander did not say this, Claude Debussy, the French composer, said this. But what makes a good musical composition is not the notes, it's the silence between the notes. And in a way, I think that what makes a good relationship, it's not necessarily the words, but it's that silence of negativity, that control, that complete impulse control that makes our relationship the best compositions in the world. We can exercise that silence when negativity wants to come out, not use our mouth to create destruction, but rather use it to create construction. Then we will have the first step to a healthy relationship with our spouses or with anyone else. That's what God was communicating, again, through these 5 voices, through the first of the 5 voices on Shavuot. Number 2, quality time. Again, this is based on this idea that, you know, spouses or others complain, oh, he doesn't or she doesn't spend quality time with me. We're so busy with our lives that we don't have one-on-one time. And that's true. That's another love language. That's another voice of love in the words of the Talmud. And I'm reminded of the Midrash that says that God is pleading to us, please, I know you're busy. I know you have to make a living. I know that's the word I created. That's the life I gave you. I understand. But give me just an opening like the eye, God is saying, like the eye of a needle, sorry, God is saying to us in this Midrash. And in turn, I promise you, if you just give me that tiny bit of opening, that quality time, I will enlarge it to be an opening through which wagons can enter. I'll make sure that I'll capitalize on that opening and bless you abundantly. Just give me that opening like the eye of a needle. God pleads for us. That's why we have 3 prayers each and every day in Judaism. It's almost fine. Okay, we're busy throughout the rest of the day, but for 5 minutes during the afternoon, I can stop whatever I'm doing and say hello to God, give him some quality time. I can put my phone away and pray in the morning so that I start the day by connecting to God, giving him that quality time, him giving me his quality time, and then my day can be as best and as divine as could be. That's again why we pray in Judaism. That's why we have moments also that are called holidays, or mu'adim in Judaism. What are mu'adim? What are holidays? Mu'adim, the word for holidays in Hebrew, is also a word for appointed times. Mu'adim comes from the word yi'ud in Hebrew, which means appointed. That's because God says, you know what? Yes, I understand you're busy throughout the year. Appoint some holidays for me. Appoint times. Let's just spend some quality time. Let's go on vacation together. That's what the holidays are about in Judaism. But again, it's crucial in every relationship to have that ability to give our all, even if it's just for a little bit, to our loved ones, because that is what ensures the other that our heart is still with them. Our soul is still there for them. I think that's why it's no coincidence, but it's very powerful. There's no coincidence in the Torah. There's no coincidence in life in general. Certainly no coincidence that the first ever conversation recorded in the Torah between a parent and a child is that conversation between Abraham and Isaac. And what does Abraham say to him, to his child? In that first conversation recorded in the Torah, he says to him, Hineni, here I am. First ever recorded conversation. Because God is teaching us that the ultimate type of relationship that we can have with our children, or maybe with anyone else, is by first and foremost declaring, Hineni, I'm here. I'm here for you entirely. This we find also in the three relationships that are mentioned at that very beginning of the Torah. God tested Abraham. Abraham said, here I am. I'm here for you, God. And then again, his son says, where are we going? And Abraham says, I am here. Hineni. Again, giving this unreserved attention to his son. Then again, Abraham meets an angel and he tells the angel, here I am. I am giving the callings of life also my undivided attention. I will share with you just a personal advice that I received from my dear rabbi many years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, my mentor, but our spiritual guide here at CBT, and we're truly fortunate, world scholar, named once a Millennium Scholar by Time Magazine, and known for his revolutionary commentary of the Talmud and his many books that he authored and so on. But I remember asking him, as many of you know, I'm blessed. My wife and I are blessed with 9 children. And it ate me up because I came to my rabbi about 8 years ago, and I said, look, I realize I don't have time for all of my children. The time that I want to spend with them simply doesn't exist. There's 24 hours in a day, and I wish I could expand that to 25, 26, 27, but I can't do that. So what do you suggest? And he replied very powerfully. He said, look, at the end of the day, your children won't remember the quantity of time you spent with them, but they will certainly remember the quality of time that you spent with them. So try and give them that quality time, whether it's an hour or 2 hours. It doesn't have to be for so long, but when you're with them, be with them fully and give them that entire hour with the most quality as you can. That they'll remember. And ever since, sharing this with you, not maybe to encourage everyone to do that too, but ever since I instituted, my kids can tell you what we call at home Abba time. And every day I take a different child just to spend time with them, to go for ice cream or for coffee or whatever it may be, and put this little terrible gadget away. And we spend quality time. But it's one of those things that I realized, fortunately, not by myself, and after many years, I realized it's one of those things that are crucial, one of those 5 languages that are crucial in every relationship, that ability to give our all to someone else. By the way, I do think that if there's one lesson from the COVID-19 that we ought to take from this quarantine era, it's exactly just that lesson. Maybe God was telling us, hey, stop these rat races. You have a choice in front of you as we go back to life. You can choose to be a rat in rat races, or you can be a gardener in God's garden. Are you going to be a gardener? Now, a gardener needs a lot of patience, needs a lot of quality time, needs a lot of devotion to that which he or she is planting, needs a lot of commitment to their children, to their relationships, any type of relationship. But we're gardeners in God's garden. We're not rats in rat races, as many of us may have been before this COVID-19. So I think that's really the lesson to learn from this, the lesson of the second language of love, quality time. Number 3, receiving gifts, giving gifts and receiving gifts. I'm truly inspired by one of the commentaries, the foremost commentary of the Torah, that asks a good question on a verse in Leviticus that speaks about a person coming to offer a meal or to offer a sacrifice in the temple. The way that person is described is not if a person comes to offer a meal, but it says if a soul comes, a soul who brings a meal offering to the Lord. Why a soul? Do we call people souls? No. Even the Torah calls people anashim, people, not souls. And Rashi says, why is this person called a soul, the person that's bringing offering? Because, again, why here does the Torah use the word soul instead of the expected person? Who usually donates a meal offering? A poor man. Because flour is less expensive than birds or animals. Yeah, he's donating a meal offering. Now, hence, the only one blessed is he, says, I counted for him as if he has sacrificed his very soul. What this is saying, what this Rashi is basically saying, is that when you come and you give something of your heart, you actually give of yourself, then you turn yourself, you change your existence from being just a person to being a shining soul. That's what happens to you at the moment of giving. When we give, we become divine, we become angelic, we become souls. That's the power of giving gifts, receiving gifts and giving gifts. And I think it's true as a third language of love in every relationship, that what makes relationships successful and healthy are not our ability to necessarily take and take and take, but quite the opposite, our ability to give and give and give. That's why in Hebrew, it's interesting to note, but the word for love in relationship, in Hebrew, ahava, has within it the word hav, ahava. It's the two middle letters, hav. In Aramaic, the word hav means to give, as is pointed by our sages. That's because love is about giving, not about receiving. It's about, love is about really giving our hearts, giving our souls, investing, doing as much of this motion forward as possible. Not this motion year, but this motion year. And I think it's true in every relationship, and it's true in particular in marital relationships. I think the more we give, the more we'll indirectly receive. But I think also the more our relationship can thrive. You know, I will say one more thing, and that is that I think that when I got married, I think it was then, maybe way before, or maybe way after. I'm sure you've heard the same advice, many of you, but someone came to me and he said, you know, you think that your relationship now, your marriage is about 50% you, 50% her. You're wrong. It's 100% you giving and 100% she's giving to you. And then you can have the ultimate marriage. So we have to give 100%, not thinking about, oh, I already did this, now it's her turn or his turn. But that's what really ultimate relationships are about, giving. Ahava coming from the word hav, which again means giving. Number 4, acts of service. And I'm reminded here of a verse, of a phrase from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, the bestseller of all times after the Bible. I think it sold something like 25 million copies across the world ever since he authored this book in the late 50s or early 60s. But Viktor Frankl writes as follows: ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that it is he who is asked. Or in simpler words, life is not about asking what I want from it, it's about asking what it wants from me. Acts of service means that we are constantly seeking opportunities that we may be too blind to see, too numb to feel. Opportunities, even like as simple as we mentioned before, is taking out the garbage. If the garbage is full, it might not even occur to me that the garbage is full, but let me listen to life. What is it that I am asked, in the words of Viktor Frankl? What is it that life wants from me? It's true in marital relationships. I think it's true in every relationship. Asking not about what I want from this relationship, what does that person that I'm engaged with want from me? That's the ultimate type of relationship. I know it says that in every I love you, there's an I. But the big question is, where is the emphasis? Is it on the I or is it on the you? Relationships that emphasize the I are relationships that are doomed, that will fail. Relationships that emphasize the you, I love you, are relationships that will ultimately thrive, ultimately succeed in every possible way. And I think it's true in general, in our relationships, if I may add one more realm of relationships, in our relationship with ourselves, with love, as Viktor Frankl here speaks about. We are sent to this world not just to take and take and take. Our souls don't need this taking of this world, this accumulation of possessions. That's not why God sent us to this world. We are sent to this world because God wants us to fulfill something. He wants us to listen to those opportunities, whether it's walking in the street and helping someone that just fell, or maybe reaching out to someone that we know is broken right now and needs our word of comfort, whatever it may be. But it's constantly asking each and every day, how can I listen to what is needed of me? Not what I need, but what is needed of me. I'm reminded of the story that is told by Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who was the Lubavitcher Rebbe before the most recent one, the late Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. And when he moved to America, his organization, of course, it was actually during the Holocaust, during the Second World War, and his organizations and his movement in general was suffering financially terribly, as many other Jewish organizations. And he was fundraising, and they heard that there is a man in Chicago that has the means to give, but they asked him multiple times, and he refused to give. So Rabbi Schneerson said, you know what, I'll go and visit him. This man was in the schmatte business, was in the clothing business, and he produced clothing for many stars and for many other companies, and he was very, very successful at what he did. When he went to visit him, the man said to him, so Rabbi, how can I help you? Why did you come and visit me? And the rabbi said, look, I'm wearing this little coat right here, and my button is a little loose. Do you mind fixing it for me? Now, this man was an immigrant from Riga, and again, he became very, very successful. It's important just for the sake of the story. So the man tells the rabbi, is that really why you came to me? You couldn't find a tailor where you came from? You need me to fix your button? What kind of a request is that? I have a huge company here that I'm trying to manage, and you speak to me about such minute, unimportant details to fix your button? What are you talking about? And Rabbi Schneerson jumped on the occasion, and he said, you know what, you're right. You're right. It doesn't make sense that I came to you to ask you to fix my button. Just as it does not make sense that God sent your soul thousands of miles away from the heavens all the way down here to America, down on earth, just to deal with fixing buttons and the schmatte business. God sent your soul to do something so much bigger. For example, like helping our organizations, helping fellow Jews, helping poor people, helping the vulnerable. Maybe that's why you were sent here. Not just to do little schmatte things, but to do big, soulful, divine things. The words penetrated the man's heart, and he gave them a very nice donation. But I'm reminded of this story because indeed, in our relationship with God and with ourselves and with life in general, we have to, and of course, in our relationships with our spouses and our children, etc., it's not about what I want from them, it's about what they want from me, what life wants from me. How can I be of service to the other? And that's yet another, a fourth type of love language that makes our relationships, whatever relationship we're referring to, truly thrive. And number 5, last but not least, it's that physical touch. Now, in our relationship with others, with our spouses, with our children, we can understand that. Yes, they need a hug. Yes, they need physical touch. That's important, as Gary Chapman also writes in that book. But in our relationship with God, if we're speaking about that marriage on Shavuot between us and God and that renewal of vows that is to come next week, how can we touch God? Doesn't make sense. God is not physical. Moreover, the Talmud even asks the question that God is compared to consuming fire in the Torah. So how can we touch a fire? If you touch a fire, it will burn. So what does it mean to have physical touch with God? And the answer, many answers to this question, but the answer that is most relevant here to our topic today is that we can touch God by doing mitzvahs. And in the words here of Rabbi Schneerson, it says as follows: God in his infinity wanted to have a tangible relationship with him. But how can we touch the divine? So God gave us 613 commandments, mitzvot, through which we can touch God. Each time we do a mitzvah, and most mitzvahs are indeed tangible actions, besides prayer and studying Torah, I can't think of any other intangible actions that mitzvot include. All other mitzvot are very tangible. Each time we do that tangible mitzvah, we're actually touching God, because God is joining forces with us at that moment and participating in our bettering of the world with that mitzvah, whatever it may be it tzedakah, be it mezuzah, be it Shabbat candle lighting, or whatever else it may be. That's why the word for mitzvah, as we've mentioned in the past, comes from the word sevet in Hebrew. Mitzvah does not mean good deed, as it is usually Translated, that's a wrong translation. Mitzvah means partnership. Because each time we do a mitzvah, tevet, we come together with God, we partner with God. And that, I think, is the ultimate type of touching God and God touching us. It's where, as the Midrash also mentions, it's where mitzvah is where heaven and earth kiss, where we can merge the material world with the spiritual world, where God finally enters this world and makes it holy. That's what a mitzvah is. Indeed, each time we say a blessing over food, that food becomes holy. Each time we use a cow's skin to wrap tefillin, we make that cow holy. Each time we give tzedakah and we take that coin to give to a poor person, that coin becomes holy. Every single mitzvah is God coming and kissing this world and elevating it. That's the ultimate type of touching God. Reminded of yet another story, a story I read not too long ago about a man named David Oron. It's a fascinating story about how when he was 12 years old, he has a twin brother, and therefore his parents took him and his twin brother to Israel for a pre-bar mitzvah trip. In Israel, they toured Israel and they went to visit this big rabbi that his father had a relationship with. And when they entered his office, the rabbi was very disturbed. And they asked him, why are you so disturbed? Why do you seem so busy? The rabbi said, I'm dealing with something here that's really disturbing me. What is it? And the rabbi said, well, this Russian couple in my community that could not have children for 10 years, finally they were blessed with a child. This child now is about 3 or 4 years old. And he was just diagnosed with cancer. And I'm trying to help them. The child needs surgery, but it's going to cost $40,000. So I'm trying to help them raise the funds. They raised $20,000. I promised to help them with the other $20,000. Now, this 12-year-old, David Oron, who's there with his twin brother and his father, hears the story from the rabbi, and he immediately tells his brother, come, I have something to ask you. He takes his brother aside. He says, look, what if we give our $10,000 that our parents were anyway going to invest in our bar mitzvah party to this child, so that you give your 10,000, I'll give my 10,000, and he'll have 20,000. They tell the father that, and the father says, are you crazy? I wanted to have a big party for you. No, we really mean it. We'll have a simple meal at home. We're ready to do this. The father then went to the rabbi, says, Rabbi, you have your $20,000. These two tzaddikim, these two righteous boys, just promised the $20,000 that I was going to spend for the bar mitzvah parties to this young boy. On the day of their bar mitzvah, they had a simple meal, but they also had a very special guest. Who? The rabbi himself, who came with a beautiful certificate of their incredible mitzvah, mentioning their incredible mitzvah, and he gave it to the twin boys, to David Oron and his brother, and thanked them again profoundly for this mitzvah. Fast forward many years, I think some 30 years, David Oron is having a bar mitzvah now for his own son. During the bar mitzvah, a surprise guest comes. Who? The rabbi. And the rabbi walks in with what seems to be his grandson. The rabbi was an elderly man now, and this is probably his grandson. And during the bar mitzvah, the rabbi is asked to speak, and the rabbi takes the microphone and he says, David, I want you to know that I came here with a very special guest. No, it's not my grandson as you think. It's that boy that you and your brother saved the day you walked into my office many years ago in Israel and decided to give me the $20,000 of your bar mitzvah party for this young boy. You see how far your mitzvah went? You see how divine your action was and how you created divinity in the world? That is a true story, my friends. But that is the power of a mitzvah. Each time we do a mitzvah, we create divinity. God comes, embraces us, embraces our actions, and embraces them to the point that they create miracles in the world, just like David Oron created miracles in the world. That's the power of a mitzvah. And that's the best way we can also touch God and exercise the fifth language of love. I want to open this up to any questions you may have, but again, to quickly summarize everything that we've studied today. Next week will be our wedding, our renewal of vows with God during Shavuot, on Thursday night, Friday, and Shabbat. And it is therefore a time in which we have to think, how can we recommit ourselves not just to God himself and to that abstract relationship, but to exercising our love towards him and towards all of our other relationships in life with those 5 languages of love, with those 5 voices of love, which are again words of affection, spending quality time, giving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch in the deepest and profoundest ways possible.